Wow, we're live.
We are live.
Feels
Hello,
so much
everyone. I am just waiting to see if a couple more people are going to join. Just literally give it 30 more seconds and then we will start the presentation. This is always the bit where we sit and wait.
44 people. That's pretty good going, right?
Yes, it will get more. We're just waiting for everyone because we don't want to start and then people go, oh, you know, miss the beginning, which is the best bit.
Yeah.
Because that's the bit that I'm in. I'm joking. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Georgie Ryan Casling and I am the content manager for Witekio. And today we are joined by Menda and we are talking all about the Yocto Masterclass Part 3, managing and maintaining a Yocto distribution with secure updates. If you're joining us on Livestream, hello. If you're joining us on LinkedIn, hello. Or YouTube or Twitter or any other platform that you are speaking to us on and seeing us on, make sure that you drop your questions and comments in the boxes. I can see them all. You'll see me periodically kind of turning and looking, and I'm just replying to you and making sure that at the end, when we have our live Q&A, that everything you need to know is answered. So what are we going to be talking about today? So obviously there's the introductions, and then Witekio will take stage, which will be Russell, and he will be talking about everything over here. And then Menda will talk, and they will be talking about everything here. And then we'll talk a little bit about how Menda and Witekio can help you, and then we'll have our live Q&A. So I'm going to hand you over to Joseph to introduce himself, and then it will be Russell who will kickstart our presentation. And yeah, I will speak to you all in a bit.
Thanks, Georgie. So hello, everybody. Welcome to the Masterclass Part 3. My name is Joseph. I'm running developer relations for Menda.io, and as a short heads up, I'm also serving as Yocto project ambassador, which is why I'm kind of always involved when it comes around Yocto-ish things. And well, this is what we're going to talk about in 20 minutes when it's my slot. And until there, Russell will take good care of you.
Thanks, Joseph. Hi, guys. So I'm Russell Bateman. I'm an embedded software engineer at Witekio UK. My day-to-day duties are just writing code and helping clients get their products out the door, often using Yocto. So on that note, I'd like to talk a bit about the Yocto release cycle and Yocto LTS, and ultimately how that can make your product potentially more secure. So just to start off, I'd like to give a rundown of the release cycle. So the Yocto project aims to get 2 major releases out per year. So one at the start, around the spring, one around the end, in the autumn. So when the Yocto project ship a release, it's not a one and done deal. It's actively worked on. Each release goes through its own 4-stage life cycle. So upon a release being initially shipped, we can all expect issues and bugs. The Yocto project are always keeping an ear out for developer feedback and issues, and these are worked on until they get a bit more confidence in the release. Then it's moved to the stable branch, where it's continuously worked on, having smaller incremental changes updated over the course of, say, 4 months. After that, the Yocto project will move on to newer releases. So then the current release will be put forward for community development. So this is where a member of the community volunteers to take on maintaining a release and carry on the work. This basically, in theory, guarantees much longer maintenance cycles, so it could potentially be indefinite. However, it's very unlikely that this is going to happen and no one's going to get bored of using this old release. So unfortunately, there will come a time when a release is marked as end of life, and if you're still shipping code on this release, it's basically down to you to maintain it from then on forward. Of course, minor releases are shipped as and when required in between each major release. So it's really great that we have such a rapid development cycle, lots of new features getting in, lots of changes being made in response to developer feedback. However, this can bring about some challenges, of course. So, software is quite complicated. Long development cycles are borderline an inevitability for most applications. And this can create a battle between, trying to get a product to market and finalize the implementation versus trying to keep your OS up to date and secure. This is a bit of an issue where releases can potentially reach end-of-life statuses relatively quickly. So I think you can all agree that if you're done and dusted within 6 months, you're going quite well. That's probably not going to happen. So, you're probably going to be somewhere in your development cycle, either looking to upgrade a release or maintain it forward to achieve some additional security, depending on your application. However, there's no guarantee that moving from one Yocto release to another will be a smooth process. So in response to this, the Yocto project have taken a leaf out of the sort of desktop Linux distribution world and have introduced LTS releases. So this essentially sees a release move on to that sort of stable state for a much, much longer period of time. So far, planned for about 2 years. So if you go to the Yocto project today, you'll see 2 LTS releases available to use for your platform. So 3.1 Dunfell, which will be sunset for community development in 2024, and then 4.0 Kirkstone, which, as Yusuf will talk about later, the end is kind of TBD on that one. But if you go to the Yocto site, that's the line that they'll give you there, is that it's ending relatively soon or close to Dunfell. So to provide a little bit more context, what I'm talking about, I've borrowed this graphic from the Yocto project. So as we can see on the bottom line there, that's our master branch. So that's where our major releases are getting pushed, and the interstitial minor releases. So take, for example, the first blob. We can call that 3.1 Dunfell. So once that release is pushed to master, a separate team kind of take that release, bring it into their own LTS world, where then that team carry it forward, pushing their own incremental changes over time. And then in between, we see the much shorter, stable releases being worked on simultaneously. So say you're using a LTS release and you get a new update. What do you expect in this update, or what should you expect? So it can host a whole slew of things like security and CV fixes, very important for maintaining a secure platform. And then there's other miscellaneous bug fixes for things that aren't necessarily user-facing. And then there's also compatibility changes. Or not compatibility changes, sorry, but changes that help future-proof certain pieces of software. So further on down the line, when you do need to update your release to say something that uses a new kernel, the transition should be much easier. So these updates are scoped to the following components. So we've got the BitBake development environment and the open embedded core. And we've got the two sort of lowest level meta layers in pretty much every Yocto project. So the Meta Yocto BSP and Meta Pokey. And then, of course, the documentation is updated alongside that stuff. Now, as you can probably tell, these are like the lowest level of any Yocto project. So you've probably got a whole bunch of stuff piled on top of this in your project. So if you're overriding any of these recipes, say pinning version numbers, applying patches, etc., you could potentially be overwriting some of these changes. So it's always worth bearing that in mind. So what should you not expect in an LTS update? So general version upgrades of software, new APIs, and compatibility breaking changes. You shouldn't expect to see any new user-facing features in any of these software updates. And then, of course, anything that's sort of outside the jurisdiction of the Yocto project isn't updated to bring it in line. So, anything like vendor BSPs, application-specific meta layers, they really relying on them to have their own LTS release strategies. Of course, that's entirely up to the developers and maintainers of their own. There's also no guarantee that every single CV and bug fix will be there day and date. So the Yocto project have their own sort of test process that each fix must be submitted to and kind of verified on their end. And ultimately, if something doesn't pass, then it won't make the cut in the release. And if you're that well inclined or in touch with this kind of thing, and you want one of those fixes in your product, then it's kind of up to you to pull that in. So is LTS right for your application? So Yocto projects believe that yes, it's probably going to become the default choice for most developers out there due to the fact that it's much easier to integrate changes, and we should be seeing your platform kept more secure for a much longer period of time. It's really great if you're married to a certain piece of older software. Say, for example, you upgrade to a new release and you have some breaking changes there. You can kind of rely on sticking to one major version in particular and kind of ride out that wave of trying to make things work on newer releases whilst also maintaining security with that older software. It's not so great if you crave new features, of course. So, you're going to be stuck on the same kernel. And, once you get a build going and create an image and deploy it to the target, it's very unlikely that you're going to see, any real noticeable difference from a user, as a user. So, no 50x performance boosts or anything crazy like that. So if you do need to upgrade your Yocto release, what paths are available to you in order to do this? So there's two main strategies. So you can kind of try and keep in lockstep with the Yocto project. So you can follow their release schedule. Of course, you can get these fixes and new features much, much faster this way. However, depending on your product or project even, this may incur a significant amount of engineering effort on your work, so on your behalf. So any meta layers that you have sitting above those two core ones will basically have to be maintained by you. And for most projects, that's reasonably unfeasible to do in in a short period of time. So ultimately, for most people, the path of least resistance is to wait for your vendor to officially support a release. So, that kind of reduces your workload massively. You're kind of left with only your project-specific meta layers to maintain, and that can be much easier. Of course, you're kind of at the mercy of your vendor to have a reliable and fast enough release schedule. There, you could end up moving up to release that's already, verging on being end of life. Hopefully, the sort of overlap and increased development lifecycle of LTS should mitigate this issue. So what are the following things should you be wary of when upgrading? So, it's very unlikely that you're going to just bump your Yocto release version and everything just works out of the park. And the Yocto project acknowledged this. The incompatibilities between releases are quite well documented. There's a whole section of the Yocto project website dedicated to, going from one release to another, and then it can generate a little almost step-by-step guide on things to look out for when moving up releases to produce a build. And going from one release up, that I can make that much easier. However, going from a release, say that's 2 years old, to something or the latest and greatest, that can still be quite complicated. So there's a whole bunch of things that can kind of be changed from beneath your feet as you're upgrading. So things like recipes, BB classes, bitbake environment variables can be moved around, changed, redefined, etc. Your host, the host system requirements can change. So, you may have to update your host Linux distribution to be compatible with the new bitbake tools. And then, any patches that you've got in your project-specific meta layer may no longer cleanly apply to these new software versions. So, you may need to either rebase those or completely rework them in some cases. And then, of course, just as a quick heads up, always be sure to update your layer series compat variable in your meta layers for your meta layers. So without the new string for the new release, bitbake just won't build it, and that can be fun. So there's a couple of things you can do to make updating easier. So a nice thing that you can do is scope your meta layers in a much smaller way, more compact way. So this makes them easier to maintain. If you're working in a team, you can kind of divide and conquer these issues much easier. Providing you use this in a more logical way, it can help you keep a much cleaner architecture. And meta layers are free. You can add as many as you want. Ultimately, when you have a build going and you deploy it to your target, first thing that you want to check really is everything still working okay? And the easiest way to do that, of course, is automated testing. The alternative is really just to sit there with the unit for hours on end, which is massively time consuming for developers and testers. So it's really nice to have a solid set of sanity checks there that you can just leave soaking for hours on end to really gain confidence in this new release. And that's it from me. I'll hand you over to Joseph. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Russell. So I'll take over here. My usual introductory slide. Well, my name is Joseph Holzmeier. I'm living in the south of Germany, and During daytime and almost all the other time too, I'm serving as head of developer relations for Mender.io, where we do an OTA solution with a strong focus on over-the-air updates. And as we tightly integrate with Yocto, this matches my other roles, which I have, such as the Yocto project ambassador. I run social media for Open Embedded. It just goes along very, very well. And completely unrelated, I am also a so-called community hero for Git.io. Just for the record, here's my contacts. Feel free to ping me anytime. I know Twitter is not that much in vogue anymore. I already am on Mastodon. It's just the Yocto Chapter 2. So no worry, I'm keeping my nerd credibility. And with that, we're off for some content. Okay, Russell already elaborated quite a bit on the actual flow, how Yocto releases are maintained, and that there are two LTS releases at the moment. LTS in the meaning of long-term support, not large tape storage or whatever is around anyway. So you have noticed that the end of support dates for those are curiously close. This is because Dunfell was the first LTS release ever that the Yocto project did. It started out as a kind of like experiment to see how field adoption turns out, how maintenance turns out, and it was so successful that just quite a few weeks, I think, after Kirkstone was announced, the members who actually provide the funding for the maintenance declared, oh yeah, Dunfell was such a huge success, we're going to extend that one too. Which puts us into the curious situation of two LTSs who are ending just about at the same time. Give or take a few weeks, I would say. The dates are not really set in stone. They can be modified by the members, and do not extrapolate the schedule of 2 years between LTS releases and 2 years maintenance too much into the future, please. Because, as I said, there are only two yet, and the strategy will probably be adjusted here and there to actually take this concept into the future. So really look at what the communication says, and you can trust the communication because I will do it. With that, let's look at why moving from Dunfell to Kirkstone is actually a common request. If you are on a project that is essentially like completely done and now just provisioning devices and shipping, you can essentially stay on Dunfell for quite a lot of time. If you do not do any hardware revisions, if you do not need any new software features that updated libraries will bring or something like that. Because after 4 years, the product lifecycle will probably be coming quite to an end anyways, and then you're good, you stick on Dunfell. But a lot of real-life projects actually do hardware revisions, especially in the current situation of semiconductor shortage, where you do respins of your board every couple of months in bad cases, because you just can't source the old components anymore. And if you gradually progress to newer hardware, you will probably need newer hardware support, you will need a new kernel, and then backporting everything to Dunfell can be quite painful. So at one point in time, and also to roll out new features, you will probably want to upgrade to a new, more stable thing, which is Kirkstone. This gives you new features, reasonable stability, and also eases the pains if you are to update to the next LTs at some point in time in the future, because 4 years of technical debt are pretty bad. Only 2 are usually kind of okay to cope with. So let's look at the details that you will probably encounter when doing a Dunfell to Kirkstone upgrade. Oh, yep, okay, that's correct. So the first, foremost, and most visible change, incompatible change, we're not talking about anything that is really compatible here, is the update change of the override syntax. In Yocto, there are variables, and they can be modified, or there are operators on them depending on the actual build that you have. So you can append to those in override recipes. You can append on a specific machine or something like that. And before Honister, which is a release between Dunfeld and Crookston, those operators were separated with the underscore character. But the underscore character is actually also allowed in variable names, which means that the parser had to be really, really clever in order to figure it out. And guess what? It did work in many cases, but not in all. So this led to a real lot of quirks and errors that bit a lot of developers really, really hard. And therefore, it was decided, let's make this really future-proof, make one big cut, and replace the underscore separator for operators with a colon. Because the colon is clearly not allowed in variable names. So whenever the parser and you as a developer look at an assignment where there is a colon on the left hand, then you can see, okay, this is clearly an override and it will apply only conditionally. But as you can guess, this means that all of the old operator syntax that you have is essentially non-valid from now on. What do you have to do? Really, by hand, modify each and every assignment? Thankfully, no. The developers provide a convert override script that is shipped with Open Embedded Core and therefore also with Pocky. And it is to be found at this path in the repository. You can kick it off at your own meta layer, and it usually does a pretty good job. There are a couple of cases that become visible after the conversion, and especially those where the parser has a problem with guessing what the underscore actually means. One end is if you have a variable name that actually contains underscore append as meaning of the name, then it will also convert those, essentially mangling your assignment. And on the other hand, there are a lot of things that it cannot recognize. Whenever there is an underscore followed by a machine name or whatever, that is an override in the old syntax, but not in the new anymore. So these are the things that you really have to check manually. The second one is more painful, but rare. The first one is really easy to spot because it will just error out. Also incompatible, but not as contrived, is the inclusive language changes. So you might now question, why does the Yocto project do something like inclusive language? Turns out that the Yocto project is a kind of old project, as at least concerning its technological roots. It goes back almost 20 years, I think more than 20 years by now, with the Yocto project as an official entity only covering the last 12. And every project that has started out as a hobbyist project, the developers usually make decisions and name things by the best of the knowledge and the best of their understanding of the topic, but not always in the absolutely optimal way in 20 years hindsight. So turns out we had a lot of expressions like whitelist, blacklist, master, things like that, which have quite a negative connotation in a lot of cultural contexts. And we said, yes, we want to show that we really care about inclusion, care about diversity. It's not that we are the one cultural circle that defines what is good and acceptable. No, we really want to reach out to everybody. And therefore, just in time for the Crookston release, there was one chunk of refactoring variable names. It's really just a rename that gets rid of such like cultural ballast-ridden variable names. Again, there is a conversion script, and this probably catches about everything, but whenever you have a proper test rig CI/CD pipeline, as the ones that Russell hinted at, then you probably have other bits and pieces of your infrastructure that inject things into your local.conf, into your environment or whatever. And those, the conversion script obviously will not catch. If you kick off the new build, then Bitbake will complain and will tell you, hey, I found stuff that I don't want to see anymore. And then you can actually fix your stuff. But be aware of that those variable names will need a little change. The last one that I've chosen for last major one that I've chosen for this webinar is the network restrictions. So far, in a recipe, in all of the tasks, you could do essentially everything. Means you could access the network in do compile, or you could write to the disk and do fetch. Both is completely nonsensical. So we still don't keep you from accessing the disk in do fetch, which makes sense in some cases. But by default, Bitbake restricts network access to the do fetch stage only. Now, why is that? A lot of source code or packages do dirty things during the configure or do compile stage. Worst offender here clearly is npm JavaScript, where you run npm-i, which does about everything. It fetches, it compiles, it does code modifications. It's just nasty. And so this essentially makes your build completely unreproducible, which is not good. And if your code randomly reaches out to some place in the internet and pulls down some other pieces of code, hey, how should Bitbake actually guarantee proper license tracing? So the proper way is to run everything through the fetcher that Bitbake gives you. And in order to actually let you know if your code accesses something on the net without you probably noticing, this restriction kicks in. Now, there are obviously corner cases that you might run into if you have code that is nasty and not well behaved and doing things that nobody does. So all of the present developers, I'm completely sure, will never have written such code, nor will never do, but you might be forced to deal with such code at some point in your career. And here it is. Bitbake still allows you to get around this restriction by marking a task as still network enabled. Example is here, do configure to allow network access again is to set this array assignment here. I think it's an array. I'm no Python guy. Again, attention, do not do this easily because chances are that your build will be not reproducible. And this might be good at the moment. It will bite you in 5 years' time. Then there are the minor things. Minor things are those who you might run into depending on your application, on your setup, on your build process. But a lot of developers will probably just get by easily. So one of the major version changes between releases is usually GCC. GCC, as most compilers, tend to get better and better and better over time in understanding the source code that is actually being compiled, which means they usually add more warnings that tell you, oh, I think there is something not really good in this code. And if your code happens to do something that was not triggering a warning earlier, but does now, you might run into problems here. This is just an example. There are other corner cases too. So be aware of the fact that the toolchain changes, and this might change your actual build behavior. Same region of build process is Python. I'm no Python guy, but one package I tried to run was using distutils to actually set itself up. And turned out distutils is deprecated, and I couldn't build it anymore on Kirkston. It used to work on Dunfell. So what did I have to do? It was just a one-line patch, get rid of distutils, and I think patch in setup tools core or something like that. And then it just magically went on again. What do I want to say? The infrastructure can change at different points. There are often minor patches needed to get going again. The last one that probably requires more changes if you're using it actively and not through bindings is OpenSSL. OpenSSL did bump from 1.1 to 3.0. And as you can guess from the numbers, this is a major bump, or not even a bump, it is really a major upgrade. And the ABI/API both changed on OpenSSL. There are things added, there are things removed, and added is usually not bad, removed is bad. Because when you try to use it and it's not there anymore, your stuff does not compile. So if you are using OpenSSL, prepare yourself for the needed changes. You will need to do them. These are the things that are like esoterically covered by now, because I didn't show you anything where it actually bit me. And so I'm going to talk about one case where we as Mender actually ran into all of those problems, because we integrate really tightly with the Yocto project in order to provide the artifacts that actually facilitate a streamlined A/B update process, so you really can have the robust and the streamlined feeling to just secure all your devices. And one of the prime devices that we usually target is obviously the Raspberry Pi 3. So we built on Dunfall. We jumped through all the hoops that I mentioned concerning layer refactoring for Kirkstone. We built and we were like, yes, let's do this. And I rolled it out and it didn't boot anymore. And I was like, nah, that's just no fun. Turned out that it's not only the actual kernel and the root file system that have version dependencies at some times. It can also be in the firmware that is either hidden on the chip or on the boot partition in the case of the Raspberry Pi. So this led to the partition where the root file system was to be found actually being renamed. So how do we actually cope with this? Here is where the second part of a robust OTA solution comes in. It's not only about updating the root file system, it's also about being able to update custom things on your device in a kind of free-form way that matches your needs. And this is where we actually could help things, because we have a custom update module that specifically can deploy the Raspberry Pi firmware. And so we just needed to also integrate this into the build by inherit Raspberry Pi update firmware, and we could boot again. Hint, it's not good to actually keep this enabled, because it actually reaches out for the boot partition, and if things go wrong there, then you have no rollback. So use carefully, but if you actually need it, then it needs to be there. And this is one of the strengths of a solution that really integrates tightly with the Yocto boot process. I actually have concluded this in the last 5 sentences. Just to wrap it up again, if you do such a big upgrade, things can bite you at every stage of your project, at the build process, at your application, or even on things that are out of your control because they are firmware or third-party components. And really make sure whatever you use to get your updates out to your devices, make sure they integrate tightly with Yocto and really stick to its semantics and its philosophy instead of reinventing your stuff. If you want to talk more about what we do, here's the contacts. And with that, I would say thanks for having me, and back to Georgie.
Thank you so much, Joseph and Russell. Amazing. I've learned a lot already. So just quickly from me, obviously this is a Witekio and Mender webinar, and Mender's just spoke about themselves, so I have to do the Witekio bit. So Witekio is an on-demand IoT software partner. We've been in business for 20 years. We've got 5 offices in Europe, the UK, and America, and we've got about 180 engineers worldwide, and we work with amazing partners like Mender. We cover a whole host of solutions for embedded. We say that we do full stack edge to cloud embedded development services, so consulting, optimization, migration, security, connectivity. We do it all. You've got it. I'm not going to bore you with it, but please do get in touch if you need any help with your devices. So I'm going to move swiftly on to the questions, and we've had a few come in already, but if you have any others, please comment on live streaming the questions on LinkedIn or wherever else you're watching, and I can see them all and I can ask them to our experts. So the first question that we've had actually is, I think, Joseph, one for you, which is someone asking how they can get involved with volunteering with the Yocto project.
That's a good one. It's actually pretty easy and complicated at the same time, because getting involved in terms of contributions to the real Yocto core parts is complicated, because it's sometimes a quite arcane kind of knowledge. It's actually so complicated that I've never done it myself. So if you look at the Yocto repositories, there is no single line of code of myself in there. Which brings me to the easy part. You can be involved by doing anything else but code. You can talk about the Yocto project, you can give presentations, you can help others, you can do videos, you can just make stuff work and reach out to others. So open source is not only about the source. Open source is also about the open, and this is where Yocto really shines. And if you have any questions concerning that, then feel free to reach out to me and I'll set you up.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so another question that we've had, it's a bit of a two-parter, so I'm going to start with the first bit. So it says, how do you deal with frequent GCC changes? Example, some time ago, MetaArm was supporting 2 to 3 GCC versions at the same time. Now I see Kirkstone supports only 1. Changing GCC every time for Yocto updates seems like a nightmare.
Shall I take that one, or Russell? Because I don't know if there's a good answer to that.
Me neither. I was going to say, hope the best.
The second part of the question, which might make it a bit easier, it says, especially in secure boot environments, we can't use GPL version 3 packages. What do you think about the future of Meta GPL v2 layer? It doesn't change too much between Yocto releases.
Okay, there I have a perfectly clear opinion, because
there you go.
If you ship Meta GPL v2 build stuff out, then you are actively harming your customers. This is perfectly clear, because each and every package in there is massively outdated. None is receiving security updates. So if you do this, you are actually a bad actor. Do not do. Either fix your build processes and your provision processes to be GPL v3 compliant, or revisit all of your builds to do something that does not require a GPL package. There's absolutely no other way to word this. Avoid Meta GPL v2 at all cost.
Okay, that's a pretty there you've got it. There you go. Another question, can we move to a new release while keeping shared cache from an older release? I guess it should only build the new packages, right? Russell, do you know can you give some updates on that one?
Just say yes.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a massive estate cache of, I think, like 3 terabytes, spanning all kinds of releases. No problem. Keep everything.
Okay. And another one, which version should I start a new project? What's the future after Kirkstone, or is Kirkstone the way that they should go? Go on, Joseph, you're on a roll.
I am. Okay. So it depends on your time scale. If you have a project that is bound to ship in, let's say, the next 3 to 5 months, I would say stick to Kirkstone and keep it. If you are early in the development stage and just getting started, I would do a crazy thing and say roll on master until it hits the next LTS. This will require a little bit more work in your CI/CD for the time of the development. But if you have like a year of development ahead of you, you will arrive just in time to get the next probable LTS. And if not, then you serve just a little bit longer until you hit a stage that is sufficient to you. This is actually a common technique during development. A friend of mine who maybe is on the webinar, but probably not, calls this death by 1,000 paper cuts. Because if you serve on master, you will have a small build failure like once a week or 2 a week, but you can fix them in 10 minutes time. Whereas if you stay on an old version, then bump just in order to get your project out. You will run into a lot of version upgrade breakage and probably spend like 2 or 3 weeks in order to figure it out. And as long as you're surfing, you're good. So this is a technique that you could actually use.
Listen, we always like something that's crazy, so thank you for that. A lot of people are asking for if they're going to get the recording. Just to let you know, you are going to get the recording afterwards, and it will have the contact details in it for Joseph and for Russell, well, for Witekio and for Mender, so you can reach out there. Another question that we've had over email, old school, is I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I know. But basically, it's talking about the best approaches to use on Yocto. So it says, I found in my research that RAUC, R-A-U-C, is potentially the best approach since we have some platform not built with Yocto. My major question is related to how to choose those approaches wisely, the update approaches wisely.
Okay. Well, I obviously am kind of biased, full disclosure, because I happen to work for an update company. But having said that, we all know that there are others, and I am really in close and good touch with the maintainers of the others. We are all friends, and we regularly have a drink together. And I would say each and every one has their strengths. ROC and the other big one, SW Update, they are both client only. So they give you an awesome feature set that you can integrate in your build. And if you are a client-only thing and you love carrying out all of your updates through thumb drives via SneakerNet, then they probably give you everything that you need. If you need a management platform along with it, which we at Mender call end-to-end, then I would probably say rather go for Mender, because yes, you can do a backend to ROC and SW Update by setting up and maintaining Hawkbit, but that's already the keyword. You have to do it yourself. There is nobody that gives you maintenance on Hawkbit. Nobody will host it for you. Nobody will actually guarantee its uptime. And that's the standalone point for Mender. So it really depends on your use case. Do you want to do everything in-house, be completely like I care about having a crazy semi-outdated JavaScript, Java-based server, which Hawkbit is, in my own infrastructure, then go for them. Or if you like SneakerNets, and if you want an end-to-end solution, then really I suggest to have a good look at Mender. And that just lost my headphone. I'm gonna dig for it for 10 seconds. Sorry.
Of course, that wasn't too biased. A little bit biased, I could see it, but. Okay. Another question. We've had a couple more questions actually. Lovely. Okay, so is there a way to subscribe to Dunfell official branch or to another release branch so that we receive emails for each PR that gets merged into it? That way I can make sure I get alerted when the CV or other import fixes are added. So is there a way that people can subscribe to the official branches to get updates?
None that I'm aware of. You could make yourself some git commit to email trigger. I mean, that's technically possible, but I know of nothing. What you can do is to just subscribe to Open Embedded Core and the Yocto mailing list, because Yocto has the old school email patch back and forth workflow. So everything that goes into the repositories is on that mailing list anyways. And then you are like force updated on everything that happens.
Yeah. The auto mailing list is the only one I know of.
So the Yocto mailing places is the place to be, people. Make sure that you subscribe after this if you're interested in it. Another question, what about node package support? Fetch, NPM, building a package that needs a native library going forward. This was broken in Hard Knocked, but I've seen some work being done on the Kirkstone branch. Does anyone know?
You have an answer there, or?
I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay, then I'm gonna confirm that, because there is no good answer. NPM is just crap. That's it. And NPM is built in a way that is really cool if you are in the cloud, and it's complete crap if you need to ship stuff out for a number of years. What you can do or should do is looking into alternative package managers. This is what I have done when I used JavaScript. TypeScript, not TypeScript, Yarn can be, with some gentle force applied, made to use proper caching, but still it's just a massive pain in places I don't want to name in a publicly recorded webinar.
And a live stream. No, thank you.
Okay, so if you have stuff that needs shipping and comes from NPM, I would probably go for packaging and building it in a prior stage in your pipeline, then injecting just the finished artifacts and kick the JavaScript developers whenever their provided artifact falls over. Sorry.
Okay. Well, you got lots of laughy emojis, but you also nearly got a mention from HR, I feel. So a couple more as we have time, which is great. Do you have any recommendations for network management for the embedded Yocto world, e.g. systemed networked, the default with systemed, Conman, network manager, etc.?
So I can only really talk from projects that I've done before in the past. So, project I've worked on most recently just kind of had a user layer, like our own application over the top of WPA supplicant and host APD to kind of manage connecting to either access points or bringing up the sort of self-hosted access point. So that's a route that you can take. Haven't used the systemd network D tools. Yeah, Conman does something similar in Network Manager. I don't know how much better they are. I don't know. Can you use Network Manager in a headless mode? I guess you can. Yeah. I personally don't have any complete recommendation that this is the way to go. But
Tracy, have you had any experience with this?
I personally have used systemd network D. I like it because I kind of like understand its syntax and how it's linking files back and forth. So if you have already a system that systemd or that runs systemd, it's cheap to buy that in. So I would probably go with it unless I have specific other requirements. But no hard opinion there. Your mileage will vary. Respectively, your requirements will also.
Okay. So there you go. Another question: is there a Yocto equivalent for Python's PEP PEP language proposal to get community buy-in before changes, or do changes generally come from the top down for the major maintainers and contributors? You're people of questions. You are testing our experts today.
Yeah,
I love
actually,
it.
that's yes and no. So there is no formal process for this. The reason for this is relatively simple, because we're just not that big. Usually, you can the core maintainers. You can approach each and every one of them directly, or if you have an idea, if you have an improvement idea, you just implement it and send it out as a patch, even if it's only like a rough draft. And I'm pretty sure that at least 2 of them will look and comment on it. So theoretically, if we had like 1,000 contributors to Yocto core or Pocky core, as Python language probably has, then we would need something like that. But at the moment, we are really, really freeform. Just suggest something, hopefully including like a proof of concept, and send it out. That's the practical thing. What there is also is the Open Embedded organization. Open and Embedded is like the technical underpinnings of the Yocto project. And we have the Open Embedded developer meeting, which actually takes place on December 2nd. And let me just put in another pitch. The Yocto Project Summit is taking place on November 29th to December 1st. So those are really coordinated because we work closely together. And if you feel like you have a good idea that that fits the core for BitBake or Open Embedded Core, feel free to just step up there and say, hey, what do you think about this? And I guarantee that at least 95% of the core people will be there and will really give it good thought and discussion. If you have something, you can also reach out to me and I'll put it on the agenda. But please be sure to also be present for discussion then.
Perfect. As we're going to get to the last couple of questions, I'm just going to put this slide up here so it kind of has all the contact details again. If you have registered for the live stream or you've emailed me, then do not worry, you will get these slides and we'll actually, as we've been asked so many times, we'll put them into the useful links that Joseph and Russell has put. We'll put it into some sort of PDF so you can get the most from it, as I know that just a recording won't help you with that. Okay, last question that I think we have is, does BitBake support unit testing? More precisely, say that I have a recipe that builds a C++ application. This app has a unit test select with gtest. Is there a supported way to have BitBake running unit tests as part of the do_compile ?
Part of do compile, I'm not perfectly sure, but there is a testing framework inside Yocto. They call it p-tests. I don't know where the name actually comes from, but I actually don't care. The crucial part about unit tests is that you have to run them on something that resembles the actual environment that your application is run in later. And do compile, you are on the host. So if Yocto always thinks about cross-compiling. Example, you're building on x86 usually, and let's say your target is ARM. So in do compile, you can't run anything ARM unless you specifically spin up a QEMU instance to run ARM unit tests in there and yada, yada, yada. You see where this is leading. It's just like no good. Therefore, we have p-tests. And if your package is p-test enabled, then you tell in the recipe, okay, this is how you build the unit tests, how they are packaged or where they end up. And then you get a p-test package. There is a catch-all package group for p-tests. So if you build a test image, then all of the p-test suites go in there. And then you can, after the finished build, you can run the image in QEMU and run all of the unit tests like one after the other. And some smiley just put me off track. And that's you can run your unit test and see if your stuff actually works. What I wanted to say is that I've done a demo for this. If you go to YouTube and look for Yocto live coding p-test, then you will find an hour-long demo where I do this over a beer, as my usual live coding sessions are. If you run into a problem, again, ping me. I don't know, but I know whom to ask. And I can say variables one more time, of course.
Also, just to point out that this is the third masterclass that Joseph has done with Witekio and Mender together. So you can watch part 1 and part 2 of the Yocto masterclass on our YouTube as well. So just search Yocto masterclass and they will come up. Whether you search that through Mender or through Witekio is absolutely fine. Okay, we are literally on time after a mammoth Q&A. Thank you guys. Thank you, Russell, for your insight. Thank you, Joseph, for being such a good sport with the questions. And thank you everyone for watching. I hope it's been useful, and please give us the message if you need any other questions answered or if you want any other thing from us. So it's a goodbye from us, and we will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.